Okay, so if you really want to get into that late 60s rock sound, that huge, fuzzy, amazing sound, you absolutely have to talk about fuzz pedals.
Yeah, definitely. We've touched on Maestro, Sola sound, but today we're zeroing in on maybe the fifth key player, right. Dallas Arbiter, and their big one, the pedal, that literally put a face on fuzz.
A fuzz fake.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And for you listening, think of this as, well, you're fast track. We're cutting through the noise to get to why this one pedal, this one circuit had such a massive lasting impact. We're talking Hendrix, Gilmour. It's foundational.
Right. So let's set the scene. We're in 1960s London, and the main character here is a guy named Ivor Arbiter.
Arbiter. Now, he wasn't just some random shop owner. He ran a London music shop. Yeah. But he was also a major distributor. He really had his finger on the pulse, knew what musicians wanted.
And he had the connections to make things happen, right? He wasn't just selling guitars. He was shaping the industry in a way.
Oh, absolutely. His business sense is key here. He was already a known figure. Quick story just to show his influence.
Yeah.
Arbiter is apparently the guy who first showed Ludwig drums to Ringo Starr.
No way! Really? Okay, so he was seriously plugged in. That changes things.
It does. It makes total sense that someone like that, seeing the demand for fuzz from all these British bands, he wouldn't just distribute someone else's pedal, he'd make his own.
And that's what he did in 66. Launched the fuzz face.
That's the year, 1966. But here's the interesting part. The real innovation, the thing that made it stick, it wasn't necessarily inside the box.
Okay, intriguing. Let's get into that. Let's dissect this icon, the fuzz face. Starting with the circuit, the guts of it. What was actually inside that 66 pedal?
So technically it was, well, pretty simple, really. A 2-transistor germanium circuit.
Germanium, okay. And if people remember our earlier deep dives, especially on the UK scene, that sounds familiar.
It should, because that circuit was, practically identical to the Sola Sound Tonebender MKI.5.
Wait, hang on. So Arbiter basically just copied it?
Well, copied might be strong, but it was very, very close. They fiddled with the biasing a bit. That's how the transistors get their power, and changed the layout on the circuit board.
Okay.
But fundamentally,
yeah,
it was building directly on that Tonebender foundation. It just shows how fast things were moving then. Everyone in the UK was kind of borrowing and tweaking each other's ideas.
So success wasn't just about the circuit. It was about who packaged it best.
Bingo. And that brings us to the outside of the box. The thing that made the fuzz face unforgettable.
The enclosure, that big round metal thing.
Exactly. Arbiter nailed the visual branding, that round cast metal housing.
Yeah.
Put it on the floor, and the knobs are the eyes, the switch is the mouth. It looks like a face.
A smiling face, yeah. It's instantly recognizable. Even on a dark stage, you knew what it was. Pretty clever early branding for a pedal.
It was brilliant marketing.
Oh.
Simple, iconic. The pedal basically named itself. And it quickly became sort of the sound of that second wave of fuzz after the early maestros and tonebenders.
But the sound itself wasn't static, right? You mentioned germanium earlier, but that changed.
It did, yeah. And this is where the big tone debates come in. Those early legendary fez faces used AC-128 germanium transistors.
Okay, and what did that specific part do for the sound? And what were the downsides?
Well, the sound, that's the magic. Germanium gives you that really warm, almost woolly, thick fuzz. It can get kind of splatty and messy when it breaks up in a good way. Great low end.
Sounds amazing. So what's the catch?
The catch is they were incredibly fussy. Germanium transistors are super sensitive to temperature.
So take it from a cool room onto a hot stage with bright lights.
And bam. The bias drifts, the sound changes completely. Sometimes they just choke up and barely work. For guitarists chasing that sound, the instability was part of the charm, maybe.
But for Arbiter, trying to sell these things consistently.
A nightmare. You can't mass produce something that behaves differently depending on the weather. It's just not commercially viable, especially if you want to sell internationally.
Right, so that instability, that pure germanium tone, was also a production headache.
Exactly, which forced a change.
Yeah.
By the late 60s, they switched over to silicon transistors, specifically BC-108s and BC-109s.
And silicon was better, worse, different.
Different, definitely different. Silicon was way more stable, much more consistent from one pedal to the next, easier to manufacture reliably.
Yeah.
But the tone changed. Silicon fuzz faces are generally brighter, maybe a bit harsher, less of that warm, fuzzy low end, more aggressive maybe.
And this distinction, germanium versus silicon, it really matters because of who used them, doesn't it? You mentioned Hendrix earlier.
Yeah, Hendrix is the ultimate fuzz face user, right?
Yeah.
And he famously used both.
Really? Both?
Yeah, it seems like early on, He was using the germanium ones, going for that huge, almost uncontrollable sound, perfect for that early psychedelic stuff.
Right.
But later, especially playing bigger places, needing consistency night after night, he seems to have switched to the silicon versions. They offered more clarity, more stability under stage lights.
That makes sense. It shows the circuit's flexibility, though. It could do Hendrix's wild thing, but other players used it differently.
Totally. Think about David Gilmour with Pink Floyd. His sound relied heavily on the fuzz face, often the silicon ones, I believe.
For that smooth singing sustain, right?
Exactly. That incredible sustain and compression you get when you hit a silicon fuzz face into a loud amp that's key to Gilmour's long, soaring notes. So it wasn't just for raw noise. It could be really musical and controlled, too.
Okay, so the pedal's a hit. It's evolving. What about the company itself? You mentioned Arbiter starting it, but then it became Dallas Arbiter.
Right. In 1967, Arbiter formally merged his operation with a distribution company called Dallas. That created the official Dallas Arbiter Company. It was clearly a move to get more structure, more muscle for distribution and manufacturing.
Makes sense. They had a hit product. Now they needed to build a business around it.
Yeah, but they also knew probably that they couldn't just rely on the fuzz face forever, so they tried to branch out pretty quickly.
Diversify. What else did they put out?
Well, there was another fuzz called the Arbiter Fez King, much rarer, apparently. And significantly, they launched the Arbiter wah face in the late 60s.
Ah, taking on the Vox wah.
Directly. Head-to-head competition. And since the Dallas side of the company also owned the Sound City amp brand,
right,
they started bundling things like Sound City fuzz wah pedals.
Yeah.
They were definitely trying to leverage the fuzz face success into a broader product line.
But despite having this legendary pedal and trying these other things, Dallas Arbiter didn't last that long, did they? Their main era kind of fizzled out in the early 70s.
Yeah, they really struggled as the 70s began. It's kind of a classic story, actually.
How so?
The market just changed incredibly fast. You had new players emerging, electro-harmonics, dropping the big muff, which was a whole different beast. Then MXR came along with their smaller, standardized boxes, and later, Boss, with their, super sleek uniform pedal designs.
So what was it about these new companies? What did they do differently that Dallas Arbiter couldn't or didn't adapt to?
Standardization and, frankly, more modern industrial design. Think about the fuzz face, that big, round, heavy cast metal thing. It looked cool, but it was relatively expensive and awkward to make compared to stamping out smaller rectangular boxes.
And probably harder to fit on the pedal boards that were just starting to become a thing.
Exactly. The new guys offered smaller pedals, often with better power options. Features like True Bypass started appearing. Dallas Arbiter was still selling these cool-looking but kind of cumbersome things, while the competition was offering compact, efficient breaks of sound.
So production costs and adapting to the new format basically left them behind.
Pretty much. They couldn't keep up with the scale and efficiency needed for the market in the 70s.
It's kind of sad the company itself faded, but the circuit, the fuzz face sound, that never really went away, did it?
Not at all. That's the amazing part. The company might have dissolved, but the fuzz face circuit is basically immortal.
How so? Did someone else just start making them?
Well, kinda. The demand, especially for that early germanium sound, was just so intense. Throughout the 70s, tons of smaller builders, bootleggers, clone makers, they were all trying to capture that original fuzz face magic. The circuit itself just lived on, unofficially.
So it was kept alive by cloners for a while. When did it become official again?
That took a while. It wasn't until the 1980s that Dunlop Manufacturing managed to acquire the rights to the fuzz face name and the design.
Ah, Dunlop. Okay,
Yeah.
that makes sense. They brought it back properly.
They did. They started making official reissues, which was huge.
Yeah.
Suddenly, players could easily get both the germanium and the silicon sounds again, made consistently.
And they leaned into the legacy, right, with artist models.
Oh, yeah. Big time. They did Hendrix signature models, of course. Eric Johnson has one, Joe Bonamassa. They really cemented its status. And today, it's still right up there. Probably only the Tone Bender circuit has had a similar level of influence on fuzz design overall.
Okay, so let's wrap this up for everyone listening. We've gone through the history, the tech, the ups and downs. What are the big takeaways? Why does Dallas Arbiter, and specifically the fuzz face, still matter so much?
Right. 4 key things, I think.
Yeah.
First, the sound. It wasn't the first fuzz, but the fuzz face arguably defined that massive, slightly woolly, clean up with your volume knob sound of the late 60s. Hendrix made it eternal, but the pedals set the standard. Okay. Sound defined. What's second?
Branding. That visual identity of the smiling face was genius. In a market where circuits were pretty similar, Arbiter proved that strong, memorable branding could win. It's a massive lesson in marketing.
Visual identity is key. Got it. Third,
The compromise. The whole germanium versus silicon story perfectly illustrates that classic tension in gear design. You have the pure, maybe unstable magic sound versus the need for reliable, scalable manufacturing. That trade-off really defined the pedal's history and the company's fate.
the purity versus practicality dilemma.
Okay.
And finally, longevity. This is the big one, maybe. Dallas Arbiter, the company, failed because, well, they couldn't keep up with manufacturing trends. But the fuzz face circuit, it's been in production nonstop, in some form, official or clone, for nearly 60 years.
60 years! That's incredible. It outlived its creators by decades.
Which tells you something fundamental about the design itself, not just the company that first made it.
And that leads perfectly into a final thought for you, the listener, to maybe ponder. Yeah, think about this. This iconic circuit, the fuzz face, has been constantly tweaked, copied, reissued, re-engineered for almost 6 decades. First by competitors, then by cloners, now officially by Dunlop. So what does that continuous cycle of copying and reissuing tell us about the difference between a truly classic design, the actual circuit schematic, versus the idea of stable manufacture or even the original components?
Is the legend locked into those original, maybe finicky germanium transistors? Or is the real enduring power and the simple elegance of the circuit design itself adaptable enough to survive for 60 years and counting?
Something to think about next time you stomp on a fuzz pedal looking for that perfect sound.